This painting makes hell look like an empire. There is something more disturbing than fire in this painting. It is the fact that hell does not look broken. It looks built. Massive columns rise from a void of smoke and shadow. A palace stretches across the canvas like a cathedral turned inside out, glowing from within, its towers climbing toward a sky that will never be heaven. Tiny figures move through the scene, but they are not in agony. They are not fleeing. They are not burning. They are assembling. There is no chaos here, no screaming, no visible punishment. There is architecture. That is the first thing that feels wrong, and it may be the most unsettling thing John Martin ever painted. This is Pandemonium, the capital city of hell, completed by Martin in 1841, drawn from the opening books of John Milton's Paradise Lost. In Milton's epic, hell does not begin with torture. It begins with a meeting. After Satan and the rebel angels are cast out of heaven, they land in darkness. But they do not stay there. They rise, they gather, they hold a council, debating strategy, assigning roles, organizing rank. And then, before the ashes of their fall have cooled, they build a palace, a capital, a civilization. Martin takes that moment and paints it as if he had watched it happen. But the most disturbing idea in this painting is not that hell exists. It is that the first thing the damned did after losing everything was refuse to accept the loss. They did not kneel. They did not repent. They did not sit in the dark and grieve. They gathered their wounded pride, their shattered ambition, their fury at being cast out, and they turned exile into empire. And they did it immediately, not after the shock had faded, not after years of suffering. Immediately, as if stopping to feel the weight of what they had lost was the one thing their pride would not permit. The palace was razed in the first hours of exile, when the memory of heaven was at its sharpest and the need to replace it was at its most desperate. Now look at what Martin shows us. The palace does not look alien or monstrous. It looks classical. Columns, archways, symmetry, light pouring from vast interior halls. The shapes are drawn from the same visual language used for temples, cathedrals, and seats of divine authority. Martin paints hell's capital using the vocabulary of heaven. But look closer. The light is wrong. It does not come from the sun or from any sacred source. It comes from fire, volcanic, red-orange, unstable, flickering where divine light would hold steady. The columns rise not from solid ground but from an abyss, darkness visible beneath them, as if the entire palace is suspended over nothing. The proportions are enormous but somehow hollow, as if the architecture is performing majesty rather than containing it. The palace has the shape of glory, but not the substance. The fallen angels were not amateurs. Milton tells us they had helped build heaven itself. They knew the proportions, the materials, the architecture of sacred spaces. They could reproduce every physical detail, the columns, the light, the vast, harmonious halls. What they could not reproduce was the reason it had all been built. The worship, the belonging, the unself-conscious grace of being home. This is architecture built in imitation, by beings who remember the original perfectly and can only construct its shadow. And that is what makes Pandemonium not just grand, but heartbreaking. If the palace is what you see first, the figures are what you notice second. They are tiny, dwarfed by the architecture around them, almost swallowed by the scale of what they have built. But they are not passive. They are not suffering. They are moving with purpose, arriving, organizing, assembling into something that looks, from a distance, like civilization. In Milton's poem, Satan does not simply rage. He governs. He presides over councils. He delegates authority. Fallen angels are assigned titles, territories, functions. Hell develops a hierarchy, a chain of command, a structure that mirrors heaven's own, not because it shares heaven's values, but because order does not require goodness. It only requires will. Martin paints this into the bones of the image. The palace is not a ruin. It is deliberate, calculated, and vast. Every tower, every glowing hall says the same thing. We have not been defeated. We are a civilization. And that is the thought that unsettles, that evil does not need to look chaotic. It can look structured, purposeful, impressive. But look at the scale one more time. The buildings are too large, the towers are too tall, the halls stretch too far into the glowing distance. The architecture has outgrown the beings who built it, not because it needed to be this vast, but because nothing smaller could cover what they lost. Pandemonium is what grief looks like when pride refuses to kneel. A city built by beings who remember paradise and cannot admit, to themselves, to each other, to the darkness pressing in from every side, that they are mourning it. Every stone is an act of denial. Every tower says, "We are not in pain. We are building. We are strong. We are an empire." And the denial is flawless. The hierarchy works. The councils produce decisions. The architecture holds. But beneath the marble and the fire, the wound has not healed. It has only been built over. And there is something Pandemonium will never contain, no matter how vast it grows. A way home. The fallen angels can build palaces and hierarchies that stretch across the abyss. They can fill the darkness with fire and stone and the appearance of order, but they cannot undo the fall. They cannot construct their way back to what was taken. No matter how bright the fire burns inside these halls, it will never become the light they remember. That is the tragedy Martin paints beneath the spectacle. Pandemonium is not a failed city. It is a triumphant one, and that is infinitely worse. It works, it functions, it impresses, and it means nothing. Because every column rises from exile. Every hall echoes with the memory of a place that can never be rebuilt. Every flame burns in the permanent shadow of a light it is trying to replace. The grandeur is real, the emptiness beneath it is permanent. John Martin painted many visions of catastrophe, cities falling, divine fire, civilizations erased by judgment. But Pandemonium may be his most disturbing painting precisely because nothing is being destroyed. Everything is being built. And that is the thought the painting will not let you set down. Not that hell is a place of fire and suffering. That version is terrible but simple. Martin's hell is worse because it is beautiful, organized, and proud. Because it functions the way civilizations function. Because it raises monuments and holds councils and believes with absolute conviction in its own grandeur. The most disturbing thing about Pandemonium is not that it burns. It is that if you stripped away the fire and the smoke, replaced the volcanic glow with sunlight and the abyss with solid ground, the city would not look like hell at all. It would look like something humans have already built, and admired, and called great. And that is why the painting is not only asking what hell looks like, it is asking why power so often learns to look beautiful. And perhaps the most unsettling part is not what John Martin painted. It is how long you looked at it before you remembered it was supposed to be hell.